Just waiting on the return of one of the councillors and then we'll start. Welcome back, Councillor McNeish. Welcome elected members, staff, guests, members of the public to the Ordinary Council meeting of the 15th of November 2023. I declare this meeting open at 5:42. The City of Busselton acknowledges the Wadandi and Bibliman people as the traditional custodians of the region, and we pay our respects to the elders past and present. This meeting is being audio recorded for the minutes taking purposes and also being live streamed on the City of Busselton YouTube channel, which is available for the next few months if you wish to watch it again. The prayer this evening will be read by Pastor Nick Costa from the Cornerstone Church. Thank you, Nick. Just take a seat, press a button, and thank you for your time.
Let's pray. God, we thank you for this great city of Busselton and its surrounds, for the peace and security we enjoy, for all the civil and social freedoms we have, for the opportunities for growth and expansion. We thank you, Lord, for the schools, the medical centres and the businesses that bring us education, health and prosperity. God, I thank you for the councillors and the leaders in the room this evening. Thank you for their commitment to this city, for their time and their talents and their willingness to serve. Father, I pray your blessing over them each in turn, that you would bless their families with health and unity and peace. You would bless their endeavours and their projects and their businesses and careers. Lord, that you would bring increase to their hearts and their homes. And we pray over this city, we pray for the poor and the struggling, as well as for the wealthy and the prosperous. And Lord, help us steward well the resources that you have given us, that the city might grow and flourish. And finally, Lord, I pray that you would guide the proceedings here this evening, that there would be a spirit of unity and also of wisdom and discernment, that ultimately all things would be worked together for the good of this city and its people. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Nick. We do understand if you wish to leave, or you're more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but thank you. Okay, notice we have in attendance all bar one. So shall I go through all the names? Yes. Okay, so we have six councillors. Yes, sorry, 6 councillors and the mayor in thing. We have no apologies. We have an approved leaves of absence for Councillor Michaela Love, who's on approved parental leave as per section 2.25b of the Local Act. Application leave, we have received 2 applications of leave for absence, one from Councillor Sue Riccelli and one from Councillor Sheris Woodhams. Cherise, I even wrote Cherise down. Councillor Sue Riccelli has requested leave of absence, the ordinary council meeting to be held on 13th December. Do I have a mover for that? Thank you, Councillor Cox. Do I have a seconder? Councillor McNeish. Is there any opposition? If not, I move the motion. All those in favour? Carried 7-0. Thank you. We also have a request to leave of absence from Councillor Woodhams. However, this request will be heard after item 14.1, which is regarding the 2024 Council committees and meeting dates as it pertains to this item. There are no announcements from me. Item 4, which is disclosures of interest. I've received no disclosures. Are there any disclosures of interest on this item? We knew have one for Councillor Cox now regarding, and also, yes, Ms. Palmer, Maxine Palmer, on item 11.3. Okay, so those will both be read out when we get to that item. Thank you. Item 5 is moving on. The minutes of the council meeting held on the 18th of October 2023 as confirmed as true and correct. Do I have a mover? Moved Councillor Ryan, seconded Councillor Richards. Do I have any opposition? If not, I move the motion. All those in favour? Carried 7-0. Thank you. Item 5.2, that the minutes of the special council meeting held on the 25th of October 2023 be confirmed as a true and correct record. Do I have a mover? Councillor Cox, seconder, Councillor Ryan. Any opposition? If not, I move the motion. All those in favour? Carried 7-0. Now move on to item 6, which is question time from the public. Okay. With regards to the agenda, I think. Yeah. Okay, do we have any members of the public who'd like to ask any questions of council?
So this is not the public presentation. So.
Yeah, sorry. Mr. Sims, if you'd like to step forward, give us now your name and address, thank you. And you have 5 minutes to present your question.
Keith Sims of Busselton. DEWA have finally publicly announced their Vass River Foslock trial to be completed over the next few months. I've previously seen samples of water treated with Foslock by them, and it was almost clear and clean. So question, part A, what can you tell us about that application?
Do we have an officer who'd like to, or a director? Sorry.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Can I just clarify, Mr. Sims, do you mean is the water clear and clean, or the Foslock application?
The Foslock takes the phosphorus to the bottom of the river.
Yep.
And in effect clears the water.
Yep. Yep. So your question is, has it cleared the water? Is it?
No. I'm sure it will clear the water, but I'm just asking, can you give any further information on what DEWA are doing?
Sorry. Sure. Yep.
It's a rather open-ended question, and I may be naive, but I've generally understood that public question time is more about specific questions. I understand that DEWA have a communication strategy and some information. I'm not sure that I can really say much other than, yes, the contention you've made about the effect is correct, although I think it does take a few days for it to have that effect. And DEWA, as well as planning the application, have a monitoring program in place for the duration. And look, that's probably all I can really sensibly say at this point, other than to say in May of this year, the council considered a report in relation to waterway management and indicated that it was supportive of DEWA undertaking the large-scale Foslock application this summer. And I'm sure that the council and the community as a whole will sort of eagerly await the results of that over this coming summer.
Thank you. Could I just make a comment on that? I think most, or uninformed, if you like, community members think it's the City of Busselton that are responsible for that.
Thank you for your comment. We'll
Okay.
pass that to PR.
Part B of my question to do with the Vass River is what new actions, if any, has the COB, City of Busselton, put in place for further restoration of the Vass River?
So for further on from the 3 stages we're doing, or because we're at stage 2 at the moment?
Yeah, stage 2 is done and stage 3 is yet to be done.
Yep.
But that's been in place for over 12 months. So what else is happening?
Yeah, so, Mr. Mayor, if I could, and if some of the other staff members might be able to jump in, but from memory, from the motion that council moved earlier in the year, I think from about May, we obviously were looking at the stage 3 dredging process, which will go through a tender process and looking at how we're going to manage that as well. We understand the Foslock trial occurs now, and then looking at the results of that, reassessing, et cetera, as we move forward. So I think it's sort of in line with that decision that council made back in May earlier in the year.
So there's nothing else in place other than what's already planned, which is 3 stages of sediment removal, and D was Foslock trial.
Then there'll be assessment of the results on that, before, communicated with the public, and then decisions will be made moving forward.
So the assessment on the outcome of the Foslock trial, is that what you're saying?
Probably as go forward anyone. Yeah, look, that's exactly right. And that report in May, I think it's fair to say, was a fairly comprehensive report. And there was, I think, in the council resolution there were, 17 separate points. So there's quite a bit in there. But in very broad terms, the council said, yep, they'll continue with the city committing to be the interim asset manager for the Lower Bass River and Toby Inlet. And that priorities would be, the priority in terms of action for the city would be continued sediment removal work. That after stage 3, there would be a review point, which will be in sort of April, May next year, where they'll work out priorities going forward. Also, as I mentioned before, support for the large-scale Foslock application by DWER. I think another important part of that resolution, and there were many, as I said, 17 parts, was support for the development of I think a more organised and structured approach to assessing any other proposals for in situ management of the river. So, and that's a matter that the city's been working with the Department of Water and Environmental Regulation on, but we haven't got that structured process in place at present. But I think an important thing to note is that we can't, as a city, do everything. And in terms of resources and so on, getting stage 2 of sediment removal wound up, finished, reported on, is a significant piece of work. And managing that stage 3 sediment removal work will also be a very significant piece of work for the city.
Thank you, Mr.
Through the chair, could I ask a question, Mr. Needham?
Yes?
You said other proposals. Does that mean from companies that suggesting that they have solutions to clean up the river?
So in the council resolution, I can't remember the exact words, Mr. Sims, but it essentially was around a science-led approach. So the capacity for individual private companies to come forward with proposals is somewhat limited in that context. In most cases, individual private companies would be responding and would be implementing solutions or potential solutions. I think it's very, very important that before you spend too much time working with any individual company, that you have a clear idea of what you're seeking to do and why, and get scientific advice in terms of the prospect of that particular treatment or idea actually being something that may work in the river. The other thing to note is that, and the council I know was acutely aware of this in May, that if you do too many things at one time, you won't actually be able to work out what thing has had what effect. And so over the coming summer, we will have a large-scale Foslock application occurring, being led by DWER, and subject to tender and other processes, we'll also later in the summer have some sediment removal happening at stage 3, as well as we will be assessing the effect in the waterway of stage 1 and stage 2 dredging. If you start to add anything more into the mix, you simply won't be able to assess the impact of the things that you've already done or that you are doing.
Thank you, Mr. Needham. Thank you.
I understand that, but do I understand that we're going to actually invite companies to...
Mr. Sims, it's just a straight question. We do have other people wanting to speak, but also this is more of an update on the Bass River, which we do have that publicly out there, so just got to limit it to questions, but, and you've had your 5 minutes. So,
I'm not aware of anything that's publicly out there other than the sediment removal.
but there is a plan ahead. Yeah. So, thank you.
Okay. So, in tonight's attachment, the list of payments made under delegation of authority September 23, page 4 and 5, listed as confidential on the 20th of the 9th, 23, items 98224 to 98360 sequential numbers about payment. Why were there 15 items paid over 3 days, and why are they confidential amounts and paid to who?
I think the item is confidential and therefore I wouldn't be able to give you any information on that, but if...
You know, through the chair, that's correct. It is confidential, and so we're not able to provide that information.
Okay. Could I make a comment on that? If Broad Construction's
I'm not going to take any statements, it's a question.
well, the same thing could be applied to Broad if they get money. Anyway.
What is your question?
So just
Mr.
quickly,
Sims?
Mr Mayor, could you advise what your policy is regarding the community attending the bar with councillors after council meetings?
Sorry, say again? I didn't hear you.
What is your policy regarding the community attending the bar with councillors after council meetings? There is no other time that the community can discuss anything with councillors when they are all together.
It's a matter for council, and it is actually a time where the councillors do get to talk and sit down and relax and talk to each other, which is an opportunity that we don't get. But the councillors are available to the public at any time. I'm available at any time at least, and those that do or do not work would still be available to you should you wish to talk to them. So that is just perceived as a time that it's for councillors to talk and also to, team build after a long day.
So the community is not invited at all to the bar to speak to councillors?
So I might just, on the question of the policy, there's no written council policy in relation to the community being at the bar. So that's probably the first thing. The second thing is probably it just comes down to protocol and tradition. So if it's something that council wants to consider in the future, they could, but there's no written policy on that, Mr Sims. It's more of an administrative function.
So the community have to ask or have to be asked?
It's not,
Sorry, I think the question was about the policy. What is the policy? There is no policy. It's down to the management of the building, which is between the CEO and the mayor and the general consensus of the councillors. So if that's something that the council would like to consider in the future, I'm sure they'd like to.
The reason why I raised that question
What's the question, Mr Sims?
about using the community going to the bar here after a council meeting when all councillors are here is because in the past, Mr Mayor, you stopped people going into the bar when they were invited by councillors because...
Mr Sims, I don't think this line of questioning's really got to do with the good governance of the district, to be fair. And I think that if the council has a tradition about how they operate the bar, maybe that's something the council might want to discuss. It's not about an individual blocking anybody or anything like that. So maybe that's something you can talk to the councillors about, but it's probably not something that's really for this meeting.
And
Thank you, Mr Sims.
Just say that my reason for
Mr
asking
Sims,
is
your
not because I
time is
want to
up
drink
now,
at the
so I'm
bar.
going to please ask you to move. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have another question from the public? Yes, sir. Like to tell us your name and address, if you could, and just flick the microphone on for the purpose. That's all right. No, it's on now. So, oops. Yeah.
Hi there, my name's Chris Green. I live on Broadwater Boulevard and I've got a concern regarding the wetlands which is under development right now. I just want to ask, Western Australia over the last 200 years have lost up to 70% of their wetlands, and yet this development is going ahead, and I just feel it's absolutely disgusting of what's happening right now. Can you give me any further updates regarding this?
So your question is regarding,
At the moment, there's sand fill going on. There's already a development on Broadwater Boulevard, which is stage 1, I presume, and then once that's developed, they'll be filling in sand fill on the wetlands where actually I live.
Sorry, I didn't catch your name. What was?
Sorry?
Sorry, what was your name? I didn't catch your name. Sorry.
Christopher
Sorry.
Green.
and your address, just for the records?
Just for the record, Christopher Green.
No, and your address.
Oh, sorry, 114 Broadwater Boulevard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, just on that matter, I suppose that's the subject of an agenda item tonight, so that'll be discussed with council or considered by the council this evening.
Okay. I've got no other further questions, just I'm very concerned of
Sorry,
how much wetland we'll lose.
Sorry, Mr. Green, I don't wish to interrupt, but you've actually booked in for a presentation with parties of interest. That's when you get the opportunity to talk. Did you wish to talk then about that item? Because this is public question time. I'm saying you can come back, but it's just
When is this?
it'll be the next item, except you're third in line. That's all. Sorry.
No, unfortunately, my wife is quite ill, so I'm not going to spend much time here tonight.
Okay. Well, I'll let you speak then.
Okay.
Yep. Sure. Sure. Yeah. Okay. So that was your question. Thank you. Are there any more questions of the public? If not, I will move on to. Thank you, Christopher. I'll move on to presentations by parties with an interest. We have a booking. First booking is by Joe O'Gary from Atlas Planning, who is representing the adjoining neighbour and this is item 11.1, DA 22-806, single house lots, 41-42 Caves Road, Marybrook.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and good evening, elected members, staff and members of the gallery.
Joe, if I may remind you, we've given 5 minutes, so thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Sure.
I don't often drive down from Perth just to speak for 5 minutes, but when I do, it's for an important matter. And respectfully, working backwards from my final comment, I'm here to speak in opposition to the recommendation on item 11.1, and respectfully, my submission is that the correct and preferable decision would be for an alternative recommendation for refusal, as per my email I circulated to you on Saturday, I believe. It's not in my nature, no matter who I represent, just to nitpick at everything, but there's 2 critical issues I'm briefly going to speak to. First one is in respect to the environment and clearing. I hope I can be succinct and clear up some matters to you. I understand that administration or Mr Needham has advised you already that it's not for him or the city to be making referrals under federal legislation under the EPBCA Act. And he's quite correct, but it's not the point. This location is a special control area under your scheme. I quoted 5.4.2 of the scheme, and it says that you're not going to grant development to anything unless you're satisfied that the clearing of the landscape value area has been considered with 3 different elements. So the logical conclusion is that an applicant in an area where there is endangered western ringtail possum, and it's a habitat and quite a lot of it, should either do a survey or advise you that there has been a referral. Because the correct approach is that when you're clearing vegetation, that there needs to be a considered
approach to that. A starting point is that is what you should do first, not after. Not after you get your planning approval. And Paul is also correct. I heard earlier when he talked about clearing generally under local legislation and with DWER and council and how you work together. But on a federal level, it's completely different. They don't need to be told it's got planning approval or otherwise. They look at it completely separately. So I hope that clears the air on that. There should be a considered approach. This is not, it shouldn't be an afterthought and someone just telling you, oh, don't worry about it, we're going to retain 51%, when the guideline is if it's more than 50, there should be that referral. But the more important issue, and the one that can get me quite fired up, is this whole thing about single dwelling. I still can't believe what the recommendation is. And even tonight, Paul correctly said he doesn't have a copy of the National Construction Code or the Building Code of Australia because we planners don't use it. It's got absolutely nothing to do with the determination of planning classifications. And I sent you that Corp decision, and forgive me, I don't like to send councils a 117 paragraph decision. That's why I highlighted the bits for you, for those of you that chose to have a look. That didn't talk about the National Construction Code. That's got nothing to do with anything. In fact, the bits that I highlighted say it doesn't matter if it hasn't got a laundry. The last thing I want to say to you is that there's no simple checklist. Unfortunately, not even the definition helps you with what's a single dwelling or what's not. It's an evaluative judgment. You do have to take the applicants at face value in terms of their intent, but the buildings and development generally last longer than people. The evaluative judgment is look at the building. It's got 3 bedrooms, 3 toilets. Blind Freddie can see that you can just easily put a kitchen and a dryer and a washer in there. It's a separate dwelling, and I'd be surprised if any other decision maker would be so easily convinced that it was. I don't wish to take up any more of your time. I wish you well with your debate, and I wish you well. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Joe, for your time. Are there any questions? Sorry, we have Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Mr Algieri. I just have, for those councillors who may not have read your document, Corp and the Town of Cambridge case, could you just quickly give a quick overview of what the outcome of that case was, please?
Thank you, and through the chair, unusually Mr Corp was a client of mine first, and he didn't like the advice that I was giving him, and that's why the Town of Cambridge called other experts, and they are one of my most frequent local government clients. He wanted one dwelling. In fact, I put plans in the email that's got 2 quasi-separate portions, but under the same roof, so you could live independently or semi-independently. But it only had 1 front door, it only had 1 laundry, and it was 2-storey, but the 2 separate quarters were at ground level. The tribunal looked at case law from all over the country. It wouldn't be the first time there's been an argument about what's a single dwelling and what's a group dwelling. And when the tribunal concluded that there has to be an evaluative judgment or an evaluation, you look at a whole host of things. You do need to look at the intent. And to be fair to the applicants, their intentions here you should take at face value. But that's not the only thing you should be looking at. You should be looking at the built form. The laundry one, interestingly, came up a lot. And in fact, I highlighted it in yellow and green. The fact that it's got a laundry didn't matter to the tribunal at all. It said it was more than a single dwelling, even though it had just 1 front door and even though it was all under the 1 roof. So I was a bit shocked and alarmed to see that there was just one sentence in your report that talked about CORP, because it is an interesting decision. The problem with those decisions, I'm a planning consultant, I work for councils and I work for applicants. If you approve this tonight, next time I get an inquiry where someone said, you know, listen, we're on an R2.5 property, it should be 4,000 square metres for a lot. Do you think that there's any way we can get around? I'd like to have something a little bit bigger than a granny flat.
Joe, I'll refrain you to answer the question rather than...
Yeah, sorry, there's a
But
precedent
thank you.
issue. That's the thing about the CORP decision. Oh, forgive me.
Thank you. Cheers. Are there any further questions? Thank you, Mr Algieri.
Thank you again.
I said Altus Planning. I do apologise. I think I said it incorrectly. So, next on the same item, we have Adrian Dew from Lateral Planning. He's remotely coming in.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Beautiful.
You've got 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and councillors. My name's Adrian Dew from Lateral Planning, acting on behalf of the landowners of 570 and 572 Case Road, Marybrook, under item 11.1. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to address council regarding this application. I have noted concerns raised by councillors in the items for debate, and I aim to address these succinctly before passing the floor to Adrian Meekins, who will provide additional context. Firstly, I'd like to open by saying that Adrian and Murray have owned and maintained these properties to a high standard for over 23 years. As they retire, they aim to build a home allowing them to age in place, occupied solely by themselves and occasionally by visiting family and grandchildren. Any notion that the dwelling will be used for any other purpose, such as short stay accommodation or as a separate dwelling as raised by Mr Algieri, is not relevant. This assumes a future non-compliance. Planning approval today is sought for a single house. We are not seeking approval for any other use. Any use that differs from the permanent residential use in the future will require a separate planning approval for the use, which would be ultimately determined by council staff. In response to the setback concerns that have been raised, the proposed setbacks are entirely consistent with the surrounding context, notably consistent with the neighbouring dwelling at 568 Case Road, Marybrook. I'd also like council to consider the alternative development outcome. If greater setbacks were provided, it would ultimately lead to a redesign of the house that would adversely impact the amenity of the adjoining neighbour. While we understand that their concerns relate specifically to building bulk and amenity, the house has been specifically designed as a single-storey dwelling in lieu of the permitted 2 stories to reduce the bulk of the building and maintain the neighbours' view corridors from their second-storey terrace. With respect to the amenity, the design of the house as it currently sits directs all amenity impacts such as privacy, light and noise generated by our dwelling internally into the site by designing it in its current L-shaped fashion. If this were to be flipped or greater setbacks be provided, it needs to be considered that these setback areas would ultimately become passive or active uses, such as outdoor living areas, parking, or the kids playing, which would undoubtedly have more impact on the amenity of the adjoining neighbour, particularly with respect to visual privacy, noise and light. The current design seeks to minimise these impacts by directing everything internally into the site. Regarding the concerns about fill, compliance with the city's coastal risk management plan requires a minimum 3.4 metre finished floor level for any new residential development, in this area. I'd like to point out, however, this dwelling has specifically been designed so that the house sits on a plinth and only raises the level of the house to specifically minimise the impact on the ground. The other concerns relate to the removal of native peppermint trees. A key brief for this project was to minimise the extent of clearing of the peppermint trees and retain the important stand of peppermints fronting Case Road, which is the key important east-west ecological link that the possums will need to traverse the site. All other trees that are able to be retained will be retained as part of this development. Adrian and Murray have also said that they will revegetate areas to maximise the tree canopy coverage. In closing, I would just like to add that this is an exceptionally well considered design and does respond to the surrounding context of the landscape value of the area, and we therefore request councillors' support for the offer's recommendation tonight to simply allow the Pollocks to move on to the next step into their retirement. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Adrian. Do we have any questions? Councillor Kennedy.
Adrian, yeah, I've just, with the side setbacks, yeah, that's all good. Is there any play there? Yeah, not a great question. But yeah, can they be moved at all without affecting the amenity of the lot?
Look, I think with the did you have anything further to add there?
No, probably not. I'm just practicing a bit.
No,
but
okay.
it is, yeah, one of my concerns in this case.
Yeah, sure. No, I appreciate that. Thank you for your question, councillor. Look, with so previously the dwelling did have a nil setback, particularly to, I guess, the southeastern boundary, and we did receive a submission from that neighbour objecting to the nil setback. In discussions with the city's town planning staff, they came out and visited the site, and I guess the architect as well. It was then decided that we would make the setback consistent with that neighbour as well. So we did increase it to 1.5, and that is where we currently sit, and think that is appropriate in terms of addressing the amenity and the, I guess, the context of the locality.
Thank you. Councillor Cox, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. You just stated that the development will sit on a plinth rather than having fill brought in.
Yeah.
How high will that plinth be? Given that the ADHD is 3.4, the AHD is 3.4, finished floor level.
Yeah, so thank you for your question, councillor. My understanding that the plinth will range, so that the site currently undulates from, I guess, the coast all the way through to Caves Road. The plinth is designed to effectively maintain a consistent level of 3.4 through the whole house. So it does range, I guess, between about 2 metres all the way through to about 3.2 metres to raise it up to the minimum 3.4.
And a supplementary question, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Cox.
What is the plinth constructed of?
I believe I might refer to Adrian, but I believe that will be constructed of concrete under the dwelling.
If I can just make a comment on that, when I met with the architect on Sunday, he said it was going to be concrete, and it'll be undulating, if you like, so it'll be 3.4 in certain areas, and in other areas it will be, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Riccelli, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. I've listened to your reasoning and the applicant's reasoning that they pushed both structures against the fence line to avoid taking out any unnecessary trees and not to affect the flora and fauna too much. And look, certainly I applaud that sentiment. What I'm struggling is if that was a primary concern, why would the applicant not build one single 2-storey building that would surely use up less of the land space?
I believe that, thanks for your question, councillor. If I may, I believe that ultimately does come down to this is their Adrian and Murray's retirement home, if you want to call it that, and a 2-storey dwelling would ultimately lead to stairs and just things that aren't really favourable for a house that you wish to retire in. So they did choose to keep it single storey, sit within the landscape at a low scale. And when I say scale there, I mean low height, that maintains the neighbour's amenity as well, to be able to view straight over the single storey dwelling.
Just a subsequent question. surely a double-storey dwelling could then be pushed towards the centre of the two blocks, given there's nearly 4,700 square metres, and given that they want their children and grandkids to visit, I guess common sense would indicate that you could put them upstairs.
So the question,
Yes, yeah.
the question is, Councillor Riccelli?
The question is, I'm wondering if that's been discussed with the
Yeah,
applicant.
okay. Thank you. Councillor McNeish, do you have a question?
Question for the director. I heard in the other item tonight that a DA allows the client or applicant to clear. Is that correct?
It depends on the context somewhat, Councillor Manish. Sometimes the issue of a DA can obviate the need to get a clearing permit from under state government environmental law. Yep. In some other circumstances it doesn't, but a development approval will not change the need to get environmental approvals under federal environmental law, as Mr Algieri noted in his presentation.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, next we have the property owner, Adrian Meekins, talking on this item. Adrian, if you'd like to come forward, you have 5. Okay, we'll just sort that out. Once that's all done, you'll have 5 minutes to present to council.
I want to run through this presentation very quickly, just to try and set the context for the proposed development that is at 570 and 572 Caves Road, the area shown in red on the slide. The zone to the right is 568 Caves Road, where the owner of that property has objected to our proposal. Very quickly, this area used to be part of the Galway Bay Holiday Park, which was similar to Siesta Park. It was abandoned in the 1960s, and the land and the individual cottages were sold off, and at that time council resumed a significant area of the foreshore for coastal reserve. That is why a number of the properties have cottages that are hard to the boundary with the coastal reserve. There is nil setback at present. Moving forward, we've owned these properties for 23 years. We've actually got 3 original Galway cottages. In the upper photo, there are 2 joined by the most awful table tennis room you've ever seen. And in the lower photo, that's number 572, where we actually have council approval to extend and renovate that. But we decided instead that we should consider amalgamating the blocks to build a retirement home across both blocks. We've always used these properties, all 3 cottages, solely for holidays. We've never used them for short-term rental. In the 23 years that we've owned the properties, we have planted multiple peppermints and expanded native vegetation across both sites. Our efforts have been rewarded with increased possum and frog sightings and many, many rabbits. We've maintained the coastal area in the same condition that the previous owners did. So we submitted this application to the council in October last year. We didn't have any effective consultation until mid-1923, and at present, or after a site visit, the Shire officers recommended approval, but upon advertising, our neighbour at 568 lodged objections, as is his right. So in response to 568's concerns, we have increased the side setbacks on his boundary between 0.5 and 1.6 metres. And tonight we're seeking your approval to proceed in line with the Shire's recommendations, the officers' recommendations. I'm not going to run through all the principles of this house, but very quickly, it's passive solar design, high visual permeability, and the two items highlighted in blue, we need to maintain compliance with the fire regulations whilst retaining as many trees as possible, especially the wildlife corridor along Caves Road. It's a flat story, single structure, designed to sit lightly in the landscape. It's got reduced scale and bulk to minimise the impacts on our neighbours. And we specifically wanted separate accommodation for visiting family and guests, ageing in place, reduced visibility from the beach and Caves Road, and we've yet to determine our predominantly native landscape design and finishes. This slide sets the bulk and scale of our proposed development into context. This is a section looking from Geograph Bay towards Caves Road. This shows the property on the left in blue at 568 Caves Road. It's a double-storey pitched roof property built in the 1980s. And quite importantly, you can see that it sits on a platform of retained soil that extends across the entire block. On both sides of the property, they have setbacks of 1.5 metres. And the bulk and the glass balcony upstairs allows overlooking of our proposed development. By contrast, we have a large flat roof single-storey home with an ancillary accommodation unit. Those homes sit on plinths, so you can see that this plinths, or the ground underneath the building is actually underset, and we've done that specifically so we can maintain natural ground level across the block and retain as much root structure of these trees that we can keep as best as possible. There's no overshadowing at all. Very quickly, this shows you similar plan, but a photo on the left that shows 568 and a schematic on the right that shows our proposed development on 570, 572. Placement of buildings is very important in this case. You can see in the diagram on the right in yellow are the existing cottages and structures on the site. Oh, right. Well, most importantly, we've tried to design this property so that we can keep as many trees and as much possum habitat as possible. If we move it south towards Caves Road, we will impact the wildlife corridor along Caves Road. If we move it to the west, we impact a very dense stand of trees with sword glass in the centre. And I'll quickly show you some photos of that. So on the top left, dense peppermint stand. Bottom left, the peppermint tree forest along Caves Road. On the right, the hollow in which we plan to build the garage, and also some possum central trees that we wish to be retained where there are multiple possums that live there. There are strong precedents for reduced side setbacks in this area, particularly with modern builds, and you can see that our proposed setbacks are identical.
Going to have to wrap you up.
At 568.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions of councillors?
Can I ask
Councillor
a question,
Wright.
if I may? You said it's solar passive. Where would the solar panels be?
No.
If I can, on the slide that's up at present, The white linear structure in the lower right of the corner, that's over the garage. The solar panels are entirely contained within an area on that roof. There's 70 solar panels.
70.
70. We wish to have the property off-grid. You can also see the plinth nature of the building in that
Councillor Celli?
slide.
Sorry, just one quick subsequent question, and thank you for that. So between the two dwellings, for want of a better word, how many bedrooms are there all up, please?
There's 3 bedrooms in the main house and 2 bedrooms in the ancillary accommodation. You could possibly use one of the other rooms in ancillary accommodation as a kids' room if you wished.
Oh.
So 6 bedrooms?
I thought there was 7.
No, there's not 7, 6.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? If not, thank you for your time, Adrienne.
Should we use a copy of the PowerPoint so it can be circulated?
Certainly, you may do that, thank you. And we have now moving on to item 11.2, Christopher Green, who's the adjoining landowner. Oh, sorry, my apologies, Christopher spoke briefly and then left. Are there any other parties with an interest that would like to speak on any of the items? Okay, none of folks, thank you. We have no questions by members which have due notice is given. There's no items with read. So I'll move on to the recommendation, adoption by exception resolution, the recommendation that the committee recommendations for items 10.1, 10.2 and 10.3 and the officer recommendations for items 11.2 and 15.1 be adopted en bloc. Do I have a mover for the en bloc? Councillor Ryan, seconded Councillor Cox. Any objections? If not, I put forward the motion. All those in favour? Carried 7-0. Move on to item 10.4, the budget amendments, the infrastructure environment. This will be an absolute majority. Do I have a mover for item 10.4? Moved Councillor Richards, seconded Councillor McNeish. Any opposition? If not, I'll move the motion. All those in favour? Carried 7-0, absolute majority. Item 11.2, the 2023-24 Community Assistance Programme, Round 2. There is some disclosure of interests, so I will ask Maxine first for disclosure. 11.3, yes.
I declare an impartiality interest in item 11.3, the 23-24 Community Assistance Programme Round 2 outcomes, as I am the Vice Chair of the Board at the People Place Busselton. As a consequence, there may be a perception that my impartiality on the matter may be affected. I declare any advice provided has been on the merit of the application.
Thank you, Maxine. Also, we have disclosure of interest from Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Due to my late disclosure, I don't have my own. I would like to declare an impartiality interest in item 11.3, Community Assistance Programme Round 2 outcomes, as I am the Vice President of the Zonta Club of Dunsborough. As a consequence, there may be a perception that my impartiality on the matter may be affected. I declare any advice provided has been on the merit of the application, and I will consider the item solely on its merits and act accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. In that case, do I have a mover for item 11.3, the 2023-24 Community Assistance Programme Round 2 outcomes? That's item 11.3. Do I have a mover? Moved Councillor Richelli, seconded Councillor Cox. Any opposition? If not, I put the motion. Carried 7-1. Okay? All those in favour. Councillor Cox, your microphone's still on. Now I step on to item 13.1. Sorry. 13.1, the Business Development Events and Marketing Program Outcomes. Do I have a mover for the motion? Moved. Councillor Richards, seconded. Councillor Kennedy. Do I have any objection? If not, I'll move the motion. All those in favour? Carried 7-0. 7-0. Yes. Thank you very much. Okay. Now we move on to items for debate. We have an alternative motion for item 11.1, pulled by Councillor Cox, and also one pulled by Councillor Ryan, and Councillor Cox will be considered first, as she was first over the post. Councillor, would you like to move your motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would like to move my alternate recommendation for refusal as written. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Ryan. Do I have any objections?
Want to speak to the motion?
Not. Well, I'll see if anybody wants to object. Does anyone object to the motion? If there are...
Oh, yeah, I object.
Councillor Kennedy, you object. Bit late there, but slow one. There is opposition. Therefore, Councillor Cox, would you like to talk to your motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was hoping to make this brief, but...
You have 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll try and read quickly. Councillors, rest assured it brings me no joy to recommend refusal of this development application. Normally I would prefer to suggest an alternative or a compromise. However, in this case I do not feel that there is much of an option. The changes required to satisfactorily meet the requirements of the relevant planning framework are too great, and a few minor tweaks to the design will not, in my opinion, be adequate. Therefore, having reviewed this application very comprehensively, I am recommending refusal. I believe that there are a far better and compliant outcome could be achieved if the dwelling was redesigned and relocated on the site. First issue to be addressed, setbacks. The application does not comply with the R Code's Design Principles 3.1 building setbacks. The proponent is asking to vary the east and west boundary setbacks from 7.5 metres, as specified in the R Codes, to 1.5. Now, I could understand a reduction in the side setbacks if we were dealing with a narrow 2,000 metre square lot, which are the lots next door, although I would perhaps be requesting a smaller building footprint if they were to build on a smaller size lot. The fact that the landowner intends to amalgamate the two lots into 4,696 metres square in total demonstrates the ability to centralise the built form, and then if not comply with the setback requirements of the R Codes, at least to get a little bit closer to compliance. One of the reasons provided to justify the reduced setbacks is fire prevention. These lots are located in a bushfire-prone zone with a very high BAL rating. The protection criteria outlined in the Bushfire Management Plan outlines that the AP's edge should be 21 metres or built to the boundary. It also states that due to the shape and nature of the subject lots and those surrounding them, there is minimal scope to optimise the siting of the buildings. In other words, at the end of the day, there is no optimal place to locate these buildings on the lots to mitigate the risk of bushfire. In fact, if lots 41 and 42 were to suffer a fire event, they would possibly pose more of a risk to the nearby homes if they were built out to the boundary. The other option here, as pointed out by officers in the report, would be to construct one dwelling on each lot. However, each dwelling would still have to comply with the setbacks outlined in the R Codes. It should also be noted that a significant reduction in the setbacks would undoubtedly affect the amenity of the neighbouring property. Secondly, environmental considerations. These lots are located within a landscape value area. As such, Town Planning Scheme 21, Clause 5.4.2 states that the local government shall not grant development approval for the clearing of or development of any land identified within a landscape value area on the scheme map unless it has been considered, Part C, disturbance to the unless we have considered, Part C, disturbance to the natural environment, including point 3, habitat disturbance. Further, Clause 5.4.4 states that before granting approval for the erection of a building on land within a landscape value area, the local government shall make an assessment as to whether it should impose conditions relating to Point A, the siting of the proposed building. Point C, the number and type and location of existing trees and shrubs which are to be retained, and the extent of landscaping carried out on the site. The commentary from the DBCA was that the application did not contain any western ringtail possum survey information. Further, according to the DBCA, the site contains extensive WA peppermint tree canopy with very high habitat suitability for western ringtail possums. And finally, the proponent should be required to refer their proposal to the Department of Climate Change, Energy and the Environment and Water in accordance with the EPBC Act. Whilst officers have indicated that the amount of vegetation to be removed is appropriate to facilitate the development, I would like to see further compliance with the requirements outlined in the deemed provisions, clause 67. The local government is to have due regard to the following matters, that in the opinion of the local government, those matters are relevant to the development subject of the application. Point D, any environmental protection policy approved under the EPA Authority Act 1986. Point N, the amenity of the locality, including the environmental impacts of the development. Point O, the likely effect of the development on the natural environment and any means that are proposed to protect or mitigate impacts on the local environment. The proponent has identified that they will be retaining 51% of the vegetation. How can we be sure that this figure is accurate? There have been no surveys of vegetation, flora or fauna undertaken. Without that, how do we know where the wildlife corridor is even located or how it will be impacted? Is the trajectory of the possums east to west or north to south? Without a survey, we can't know. The proponents have stated that they have located the buildings abutting the side boundaries to minimise the removal of vegetation. The entire lots are heavily vegetated. There will be loss of habitat no matter where the buildings are located.
5 minutes.
I would also... How long have I got? Am I done?
Run out, but carry on.
Sorry, I'll go as quickly as I can. In addition, the lots are low-lying and subsequently the requirement for a finished floor level of 3.4 ADHD will result in site works of up to 1.4 metres. You would have to assume that a substantial amount of fill required to comply with the finished floor level would have an additional adverse effect on the vegetation, and as we've heard tonight, the development will be built on a concrete plinth ranging in height from 2 metres to 3.2 metres, which I imagine would require a massive amount of concrete, which would potentially have even a more detrimental effect on the surrounding vegetation than sand fill. Finally, the issue of the single residence dwelling. The R codes define a single house as a dwelling standing wholly on its own green title. This application straddles 2 green titles until it's amalgamated. A dwelling, I would interpret that as one singular. This application proposes one single dwelling and a 200 metre square sleeping accommodation. These are 2 separate built forms. These 2 separate built forms are substantial in size and absolutely capable of being internally modified.
If you could summarise now, Councillor Cox, please.
Okay. As we've heard tonight from Mr Algieri, the Court versus Town of Cambridge, 2019, the Tribunal refused the application as a single dwelling using an evaluative judgment. In summary, if we approve this development application, it will set a dangerous precedent with regard to a number of issues. Therefore, councillors, I would urge you to support my alternate recommendation for refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The officer's recommendation states that the application submitted for development is considered by the council to be generally consistent with the local planning scheme number 21 and the objectives of the zone within which it's located. My response to that statement is no, it's not consistent. There are numerous reasons why I cannot support this DA, but in the main it is because the R code's definition in a SAT determinant is, and I quote, a dwelling, a building or portion of a building being used, adapted or designed or intended to be used for the purpose of human habitation on a permanent basis by a single person, single family or no more than 6 persons who do not comprise a single family. Not 2 dwellings, as the Corp SAT decision also stipulated. Noting the officer's comment in response to Councillor Cox and my alternate, it states, while the lots have a residential density of R2.5, They are more closely aligned in terms of size and frontage to an R10 or an R12.5 density. What a bizarre comment. Councillors, we're not allowed to suggest that the second dwelling could be adapted, yet we are supposed to believe that the land could be more closely aligned with something which it's not. The other issue which I raise are to do with the CHR maps or the CHAR maps, whichever way you look at it. In a submission from DPLH, they said, no information to address SBP 2.6 or the city's CHR maps has been provided in the application. Prior to the development application being determined, the city should be satisfied that coastal hazard risk has been reduced to an acceptable level in accordance with the CHR map, and demonstrate that the proposal will not expose people and or infrastructure to an unacceptable hazard risk. The officer's comment says, the CHR map is a strategic document that currently has no weight in development approval decisions until gazetted in the LPS 21. The site has been identified to protect from erosion hazards and accommodate inundation hazards. The site requires 3.4 AHD FFL, and this is demonstrated in the plans. It should be noted that the development approval, should it be allowed, makes the city more vulnerable. How so? Because should our reserve be affected by a future event, the pressure will be put on us to install erosion mitigation to protect this and any other property which has been given approval under these terms. I suggest to you, councillors, that it is a very real danger in disregarding the approved CHR map and the suggestion it has no weight currently because TPLH think otherwise. An approval clause says, in the current document, this lot is located in an area likely to be subject to coastal erosion and or inundation in the next 100 years, confirming what DPLH have said. Councillors, once again, there are more reasons to reject this application, but really, realistically, the ones I described should be enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Do I have a speaker against? Councillor Kennedy.
Yeah, great points. Mine are very short. I just think based on the merits of the application, I'd agree subjectively it looks big. The concrete plinth adds a lot of embodied energy. Maybe there's some more environmental ways we can go about it. But looking at its merits, I think the options for the applicant to not amalgamate the block and adjust their setbacks seem possible. And also looking at the R codes, they're not practical in this situation because if we consider that we didn't amalgamate the blocks, the R code's 2.5 and you need to keep 7.5, so you'd only have a 3 metre corridor down the middle. So I can see that the R codes, maybe they can have a bit of discretion around them. So I see this design, amalgamating the blocks, is actually a considerable design. It's got good principles from a common sense perspective. And I think if we were to reject it, even in regards to the environmental survey and the trees, I think there would just be ways to work around it. And the design at the moment is good, but yeah, then we'd start putting limitations on that and we're going to get a poorer design from that. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Do I have a speaker for? Well, is it hands up or lights up? Sorry.
I'm speaking for the motion because I accept Councillor Kennedy's discussion and merit, but it was based on if we have an amalgamated lot. What concerns me about this application is a single house to be assessed on a single lot. We don't have a single lot. So there's been a lot of discussion on if it were a single lot, boundary setbacks and environmental stuff. But I'm wondering about how it gets past go, given that the application is supposedly to be assessed as a single house on a single lot, which we do not have. Now, a conditional DA made on an amalgamated lot, as I asked earlier, may well open the door for clearing, and federal government application there too opens the door without even a building permit perhaps to have clearing. So I just don't know why we're stepping out on a limb to support this when really an amalgamated lot should have been the basis of the single dwelling to be assessed, and we can assess where those boundaries are and the setbacks and all the rest of it then. So in conclusion, I support the motion. I'm drawn to the reasons for the alternative motion that says this application comprises 2 lots, and I stopped reading there. But I did listen to Councillor Kennedy and all the other councillors, which is good advice for an application that may come to us in the future if and when we are dealing with a single lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McNeish. Do I have a speaker against? Speaker for? Councillor Riccielli.
Thank you. I don't like this seat because I don't get noticed over here. Our codes are a state planning policy that control residential development. They consider firstly whether a development is deemed to comply. If it does not comply, then it assesses the design principles. If a proposal does not then satisfy the design principles, it should be refused. In this particular case, the application is deemed not to comply because the setbacks to both neighbouring boundaries are 1.5 and 1.6 metres, rather than the required 7.5 metres. In other words, both structures are butted right up against the neighbour's boundary. Can I ask, actually, can we just stop the timer? Can I ask you, please, Joe, to get that map up on page 95?
Stop the timer.
Yep,
Is that
sorry, that's a stop the timer.
Is that a thing,
Yep,
is it?
It is, yeah, absolutely. Technical problems. The relevant design principles that would allow this application to still be approved are if by building closer to the boundary, it reduced the impact of building bulk on adjoining properties and minimise the extent of overlooking and resultant loss of privacy on adjoining properties. Now, this is really tricky because if we have a look at this picture here, in all fairness, the house next door that is opposed to this application has also built right up to the boundary line and is 2-storey. So it will overlook this proposed development. However, this house was built over 30 years ago and was not subject to the same restrictions. It is also quite a small footprint on the block compared to the bulk of this application. I can only assess the application in front of me now. This applicant plans to amalgamate their 2 blocks, which will provide a total of nearly 4,700 square metres. Plenty of space. By placing the 2 structures so close to the neighbouring boundaries, it definitely does not reduce the impact of building bulk on adjoining properties, nor does it reduce the extent of overlooking. The neighbouring property on the east is particularly impacted by the bulk and overlooking aspects because this development is pushed so far forward on the block. The entire bulk is protruding onto their coastal frontage. Now again, in all fairness, if you look at this same picture, and you'll see that the second house along is about the same bulk and shape as this proposed development, but the difference is that it is pushed much further back on the block. I've listened to the applicant's reasoning that they have pushed both structures against the fence line and towards the front to avoid taking out unnecessary trees and affecting possum habitats, and I genuinely applaud their sentiment. However, surely if this was a primary concern, building one two-storey building or even one large single structure that did not require so much land would have been preferable. With regards to point 2 on Councillor Cox's alternative, identifying flora and fauna concerns, it is quite a fine line as to whether this can be included as a reason for refusal. It is dependent on whether the applicant is accurate with their assessment that 51% of remnant habitat is to be retained. The proposed development requires substantial clearing of a landscape value area that contains extensive WA peppermint tree canopy, which have a very high habitat suitability for the critically endangered western ringtail possum. The significant impact guidelines of the DCCEEW, and I wasn't going to read all that out, identify that clearing of more than 50% of a remnant habitat is a significant impact.
15 seconds.
1% more clearing seems to warrant a referral to DCCEEW. I believe further clarification needs to be sought as to the accuracy of this 51% figure. I won't go into all of the single dwelling because that seems to be covered, but I am supporting Councillor Cox on all three reasons for refusal for this DA. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Councillor Riccelli. Do I have anyone against? Mover for? If not, I will put the motion. All those in favour? All those opposed? 7-0. Carried 7-0. Sorry. Thank you, councillors. I'll move on to item 14.1. Move on to item 14.1. We have two alternative motions for item 14.1 pulled by Councillor McNeish and Councillor Ryan, and then also by the officers, has been pulled by the officers as well. The recommendation, which is including McNeish. Yes, sorry. So, Councillor, as I said in the briefing, Councillor McNeish has included the amendments made by the officers with regards to the dates in July. Moving forward, Councillor McNeish, would you like to move your motion, please? Well, you still have to move it.
I so move, as written.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Ryan. Do we have any objections? If not, I move the motion. All those in favour? Carried 7-0. Thank you. That was it. Okay, so for the next item, we have a request for leave of absence from Councillor Woodhams, which we will now consider as item 14.1. The 2024 Council and Committee meeting dates has been endorsed. So, Councillor Sharice Woodhams has requested a leave of absence for the ordinary council meetings to be held on the 13th of December 2023 and Wednesday the 31st of January 2024. And tonight's, which is the 15th of November 2023. Do I have a mover for that? Thank you. Moved Councillor McNeish, seconded Councillor Richards. Do I have any opposition? If not, I move the motion. All those in favour? The motion's carried at 7-0. Move on to item 17.1, which is urgent. Well, item 17 is urgent business, but we move on to the item 17.1, which is the committee appointments. We have been presented with one further item of urgent business. This item will be considered at 17.1. In order to vote on this item, I will seek a decision to accept the reports as an item of urgent business under 5.91 of the Standing Orders Local Law 2018, as it practically cannot wait inclusion into the next agenda meeting. So therefore, do I have a motion to accept this report? Councillor McNeish, seconded. Councillor Riccelli. Do I have, all those in favour, I'll move the motion. All those in favour? Carried 7-0. In which case, I will move on to item 17.1. We've received an alternative motion from Councillor Riccelli as displayed on the screen. Councillor Riccelli, would you like to move your motion, please?
I'd like to move my motion as written, please.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cox. Thank you. Are there any opposition? Thank you. Therefore, however, there is opposition. Therefore, I will Councillor Shelley, do you want to speak to your motion?
Thank you. The Local Government Act allows for the formation of council committees, and these play a very important role. They contribute towards the effective functioning of the council and examine issues and various facets of the organisation in greater depth and detail, enabling them to develop recommendations for consideration by council as a whole. At the City of Busselton, we have 9 general committees, 4 ministerial committees and 11 working and reference groups, totalling 24 altogether. There are 8 councillors at the City of Busselton that these committees and groups need to be spread across. Now, I don't claim to be an expert in mathematics, but one would presume that a fair distribution of workload would entail each councillor being on 3 of these. Unfortunately, this does not seem to have transpired. One might also presume that out of those 8 councillors, there may be some working full-time, some retired with council being their only job, some with young children to look after, and some with adult children and grandkids. Taking these different circumstances into consideration, my alternative recommendation asks that all councillors nominate to be on a minimum of 2 committees, not 3, as would be ideal, but just 2. One would hope that councillors would step up and nominate for a 3rd to ensure that equal distribution of workload. Further, I don't think I'm going out on a limb here when I conclude that when you put your hand up to be a councillor, you would want to be across as many facets as possible in your role in order to serve your community to the best of your ability. Being on different committees expands your knowledge base in different areas, leading to a more productive council overall. One would certainly hope that no councillor comes on board with their focus primarily on just one committee or facet, or armed with a personal agenda that would dissuade them from expanding their knowledge into different areas. That would be very concerning indeed, and in contradiction to our role as a councillor. My alternative also recommends that all councillors be a part of the Audit and Risk Committee. The Audit and Risk Committee serves to support council in fulfilling its governance and oversight responsibilities in relation to financial reporting, internal control structure, risk management systems, internal and external audit functions, and ethical accountability. Given the importance of this committee and the fact that it only meets 4 times a year and the indication that it will require some changes moving forwards, I believe it would be beneficial for all councillors to have an understanding of audit and risk and be equally involved in any future amendments. Finally, I've recommended that all councillors be appointed to the Behaviour and Complaints Committee. The Behaviour and Complaints Committee was established in accordance with Section 5.8 of the Local Government Act for the purpose of dealing with behaviour complaints made under the City's Code of Conduct involving council members. The committee is tasked with a very serious job and is responsible for making a finding as to whether an alleged complaint has or has not occurred based on the evidence provided, and, if a breach has occurred, determining what action should be taken. This committee, by its very nature, requires all councillors be a part of the decision-making process. Why would you not want to be involved in this vital decision-making committee? More importantly, a resolution was previously passed by Council stipulating the terms of reference include representation from all councillors. As I'm sure you are all aware, Section 9.2b of our Code of Conduct, under the heading of Personal Integrity, stipulates that a council member must comply with all policies, procedures and resolutions of the local government. At present, Councillors Ryan and McNeish have declined to be a part of the Behaviour and Complaints Committee. Being appointed alongside all of the other councillors would fulfil the request to be on a minimum of 2 committees and avoid any breaches of the personal integrity section of our Code of Conduct. I appreciate that the officer recommendation includes some legal advice around whether we can insist councillors go on a committee they have not nominated for. The legal advice includes 2 views, a broader view that would allow this and a narrower view that would preclude this. I'm winding up. No. Councillors can choose to fight against my alternative motion, seeking to endorse the narrower legal advice view. However, the reason I have put this alternative motion forward is to ensure a more equitable spread of workload, expansion of knowledge into different areas of council, and full membership on 2 of the most important committees of council. If we truly have the best interests of our community at heart, then we need to ensure a productive, transparent and efficient council moving forwards, and I believe that my alternative motion is a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riccielli. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll keep this fairly brief. The Audit and Risk Committee sounds a little bit intriguing, doesn't it? The fact that some fellow councillors are willing to forego participating in any other committees just to be on only the Audit and Risk Committee is also quite intriguing. It has piqued my interest. Councillor Riccielli has already outlined the purpose of this committee, so I won't labour this point. However, I will acknowledge that process, policy, accountability, governance and transparency are all key elements of a well-functioning local government. So, councillors, let's all get involved. It provides a very important function. And as we've heard tonight, if the council considers it appropriate, then the whole council can be appointed to the ARC. I think it's great. I think we all need, clearly issues have been raised over the last couple of years with regard to audit and risk, and we can all assist in solving those problems because we can always do things better, can't we, councillors? So let's all jump onto this committee. I'm already on approximately 9 committees and working groups. Happy to make it an even 10. Officers, and further to Councillor Riccielli's other points, I totally concur. Officers are supportive of all councillors being requested to nominate for at least 2 committees, and I believe they are keen to take that on going forward and make that part of induction for new councillors. And the intention of retaining all councillors to the Behaviour Complaints Committee really, I guess a primary function of that is to contribute to the effective functioning of council, which I believe councillors we all aspire to do. So therefore I would commend Councillor Riccielli's motion to councillors and hope that you will support her recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Do I have a speaker against? Councillor McNeish.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't disagree with quite a bit of what has been said. I note that point 2 and 3 in the amended recommendation, in my view, have been sufficiently dealt with in the legal advice that arrived after this was drafted. And clearly I'm a proponent of the narrow view, thinking it only fair and reasonable. As for the other commentary about point number 1, councillors serve their role under the Act in the decision-making process as best they see fit where their skills align. And that's reinforced by the legal advice that discourages, if I might use that term, the ability of the council to crudely force a councillor somewhere they don't feel their skills are aligned and haven't nominated. So we each serve according to our ethics and our conscience and our skill alignment, and if that is to be to vastly improve, for example, the Audit and Risk Committee, then I'm ecstatic to hear that, because you might recall some 18 months ago I suggested sitting there that the Audit and Risk Committee needed to upgrade its performance, if I can put it that way, and perhaps lend an ear to the industry standard, its model terms of reference, to give it a broader scope. And I might add, introduce the whole concept of risk into the assessment of what happens in this organisation, which might have been helpful in other significant areas currently before us. So I think there will be a need for a dedicated application to a new terms of reference, broader terms of reference, specified by the council in a report to come back that sets a far greater context than what has been considered here. And I don't, this has arrived before the legal advice as well, because decision-making out of context is just not good decision-making. So I'm foreshadowing my alternative, which hopefully, if this is lost, will be dealt with immediately. And you can see that it gives far greater context and builds on what the CEO was alluding to or recommending anyway. And it also gives, finally, some councillors a little bit more time to consider what might be best for the coming 2 and more years. And I might add that the discussion as to nominating yourself on a committee and what that involves is best dealt with by more than being a councillor for about 1 hour after being sworn in. So we can talk about that at another forum. But this gives us another month or so to assess the greater context if my alternative gets up, if this motion is lost. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Manish. Do we have a speaker for? Sorry, your microphone's still on.
Sorry.
Speaker against?
I'm going to speak against. Clause 2.53 of the Local Government Act says the local government has the legal capacity of a natural person, and I will argue that this amended recommendation is ultra vires. You cannot force anyone to be on any committee that they don't want to be on. You can request, but they don't have to. The argument that all councillors should be on the audit and risk negates having committees. And the advice from the lawyers says that the council could not lawfully appoint all council members to a particular committee. Sorry? And the officer's report suggests that the appointment of all members was invalid on the Behaviour and Complaints Committee. 9.2b, Councillor Riccelli, a council or committee member must comply with all policies, procedures and resolutions of the local government. We are told time and again that councillors can vary the policies, staff can't. In a previous notice of motion of mine, the then Director of Finance and Corporate Services and now the CEO advised that a council can request but not direct a committee. Hence, my motion was then ruled out of order. He also referenced 5.4a of the standing orders with the concurrence of the Mayor may exclude from the agenda any notice of motion deemed to be or likely to include a breach of any of these standing orders or any other written law, and this is along similar lines. I'd also like to point out that it's somehow indicating that I'm a lazy councillor, but I have nominated for numerous advisory and reference groups, as I did when I was elected in 2021. I believe that the Audit and Risk Committee will be a very busy committee should we be appointed to that committee and be allowed to do the work that during the election I made the promise that I want this council to be open, honest and accountable. And to that end, I cannot understand why other councillors are railing against it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Do I have a speaker for? Speaker against? If not, I'll put the motion. Sorry. Sorry, I understand that, but I've got now Councillor Richards putting a light.
You said, is there a speaker against?
Yes, you want to speak against.
Yeah.
Thank you, sorry, yes. I didn't see that light come up, so.
There's a little part of me that just loves to see your deer in the headlights look that you get. Look, the reason that I speak against, and I keep this very brief, is really down to the legal advice that we've recently received. I too am on a number of the committees and advisory groups, and am happy to do that. Even prior to being on a member of those groups, I often attend meetings that I'm not a part of the committee, or I'm not delegated to it, but I go so that I can get the information that I need. But given recent legal advice and in the interest of efficiency with the potential of a revolving door of appointments and resignations, when we're nominating people, putting people onto committees that they don't necessarily want to be on or they don't have an interest in, I think will be a detriment to the efficiency of how they run. So it's my intention to sit in on those committee meetings, whether I'm a member of them or not. And I concur that I think that it's ill-advised to force people to be on any committee that they don't want to be on. And alternatively, if there is a committee that you really want to be on, then go and sit in on it. So, just my 2 cents.
Thank you. Speaker 4? If not, the right to reply to Councillor Riccelli. Thank you.
Thank you. Firstly, can I just clarify that I'm not forcing a councillor, so perhaps the wording wasn't clear. I have requested to nominate for a minimum of 2 committees, and points 2 and 3 would fulfil that commitment, and it's already been indicated that the councillors McNeish and Ryan would like to be in the audit and risk. It has also been clearly emphasised by everyone that has spoken here just how important the Audit and Risk Committee is. Surely it would be much more efficient if all councillors were on there, because otherwise we're going to be spending our time relaying it back to the councillors that aren't on there to explain what processes we are undergoing. So this is all about smart governance and efficient functioning. As I've also identified, no, I did read the legal advice before I put the wording through for this, and that was what I was waiting on. And in the wording, it does identify that there is a broad and a narrow view that can be taken. I've also identified that you do have a choice to fight this and choose to take the narrower version of this. What I have, I guess, been hopeful of in my recommendation is that councillors will step up, appreciate that there is an unequal distribution of workload at the moment, and that it is to their best interests to expand their knowledge base and to be on more than one committee. And lastly, with regards to the comments being brought up around the Behaviour and Complaints Committee, I'd just like to remind the new councillors and those that were on here previously that this committee functioned very effectively up to now with all of us on the committee, and that it, by its very nature, it requires all of us to be on the committee. So I cannot see how not wanting to be a part of this committee benefits the community, benefits us, benefits the functioning of the council. I'm at a loss as to why you would not want to be on such a vital and important committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riccelli. Being that, I will put the motion forward as seen in front of you. All those in favour? All those against? Motion's lost 4-3. No. Lost 4-3? 3-4. So, okay, now we'll move on to Councillor McNeish's alternative. Would you like to move your motion?
I move as printed on the sheet in front of us.
Thank you.
Is that okay?
Thank you. Just bear with me 2 seconds. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Ryan. Thank you. Do you wish to speak to your motion? Oh, sorry. Are there any opposition? Okay, we have opposition. Then please speak to your motion.
Thank you, sir. Firstly, I'm glad to see the enthusiasm that's been bred into the Audit and Risk Committee. I thought 18 months ago that it was just going through the motions, and it's great to see the enthusiasm. And I hope it does a lot of good things, which I'm hoping for it to do. As per the alternative recommendation here the motion now that I'm moving, I think it's important that we note the legal opinion that we sought, because we do note key items that come through in our key agenda items that come through, like a report, an extensive report. We note that we've seen it. And this is an industry kind of a unique situation, so it's important that that be recorded. And there it is, number 1. Accordingly, that leads straight on to number 2, Councillor Ryan's previous and still current nomination to the ARC. And when I say ARC, I mean the Audit and Risk Committee. Now, number 3 is where I like to introduce the decision-making that allows a bit more time to fine-tune and establish some context. So we go through the first part, which is as per the Chief Executive's desire. We need a mechanism to discuss those items, but need it be a committee? I don't think so. If they're all comprising all councillors, that is the council. And I think it was noted a month or so ago that there could be and probably should be a discussion on different options. And I'm looking forward to that to be discussed at a later date. Number 3, part 2, the implications of and for the brief of attracting an independent person. Excellent. Let's set the brief. What kind of skills are we going to look for? What are the selection criteria? You know, we don't attract a person to the organisation without having that detail. So we've got a little bit of time for the CEO to put that together. Part 3, I'd really hope that we would embrace the groundwork that the industry's done on audit committees and grab the best parts, probably not all, because as the Chief Executive said before, one size doesn't fit all, but we can certainly review that document and grab all the good stuff that's been put together over probably 10 years across the industry. Why wouldn't we use that as a resource? And I've provided the link there. Number 4, part 4, what model options are available to assess risk in this place? Well, you know, I just don't want this to be an audit committee. I want it to be a risk committee as well. Why would it be called an audit and risk if we don't assess risk? So there's a whole other new element that as an organisation we need to explore, because we've certainly seen some of what can happen in the downside of risk that's not considered. And once the report comes back, that will indicate the number of people and it will be clear in the terms of reference for the councillors to assess if they want to nominate to go on this committee. Just as the previous council established its committee structure 3 days before the election, and brand spanking new councillors were then thrust into that structure. You know, I'm suggesting we don't have a repeat of that. I'm suggesting there be a little bit more consideration, and the report coming back from the CEO can encapsulate all these points nicely, and we can have a fully considered vote on the matter then. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McNeish. Councillor Ryan.
This is a good motion, and in relation to the items this afternoon that I didn't get to debate for the merits of having fortnightly meetings, this would have been one of those things that we could have put to the next fortnightly meeting, because to receive a report, I mean, we got an email through late last night to say that we've got the information, but we didn't get it today, and we've had a really busy day to try and understand legal opinion, the fors and against, and quite frankly, I think that's unfair. I fought really hard for the last 2 years in the Audit Committee to get some semblance of change. I raised an issue of the guidelines that nobody knew about, and now we see that they've been raised. So, as suggested, I think this is a great alternative recommendation, and it should be supported so that we can move forward in a timely manner and have a look where to from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Do I have a mover against? Councillor Riccelli.
I'd like to foreshadow an alternative for this, should this motion be lost, and that is that point 1, the relevance of retaining and replacing the Behaviour and Complaints Committee, be removed. I don't have any particular opposition to the rest of the points under item 3. And the reason being that why do we need a committee? Because I believe it's a very efficient way to manage behaviour and complaints. It's governed by an agreed upon terms of reference. It's more transparent to the community. And most importantly of all, it's operated very efficiently up till now. So why change it? Thank you.
Speaker for? Speaker against? Yeah, so if this motion is lost, we'll go to Councillor Celli's foreshadowed motion, which is what you see in front of us, minus 0.1.
Ask a question, sir,
You may ask a question.
of the CEO. 3.1, I was cognizant of the Chief Executive's desire to bring a report back that, amongst other things, commented directly on that. And that's why I've respected that and put that in. Perhaps he might like to make a comment to Councillor Celli.
May I allow that?
Can I respond to that, if that's okay, through the Mayor? I am aware of your, obviously I've read the comments as well. However, again, I come back to the point, it's operating efficiently before, why change it?
Okay, sorry. Thank you. Not a question. Okay, I'll just move forward, sorry. So do we have a motion, Speaker for? Speaker against? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? Motion is carried, 4-3. Oh, it requires 5, absolute majority decision. Okay.
For the ease of you could, Mr Mayor, offer to break down the resolution the recommendation to parts.
Okay.
That's something that could be done where you could look at breaking it down into individual parts, because 3 is not an absolute majority decision. Neither is 1. Or accept that absolute majority is achieved.
On advice, we're going to move forward to the foreshadowed motion. Councillor Celli.
I'd like to move...
Sorry, point of order.
Please take a seat. Councillor McNeish.
We have a recommendation that's been carried on the majority vote. And if it does not apply to part of the recommendation, because it didn't achieve an absolute majority, that does not foul the rest of the content.
Through the chair, I think that's correct, and so it would only be part 2 that cannot be carried. The rest of it is carried.
So
But
we
you
could
could
carry, we
choose-
removed part 2 and carried 1 to 3 initially.
You
Okay, because you've got sufficient,
Yeah.
0.3.
you've got sufficient votes to satisfy 1 and 3, correct?
Yeah.
So, point 2.
you could report part 2.
Absolute majority. So therefore you cannot appoint councillor Ryan to that committee.
So you could Through the chair, you could either choose to put part 2, as you indicated earlier, Mr CEO, put each of those parts separately, or put part 2 again separately, or otherwise that part will just not be enacted.
However, you do have a foreshadowed motion from councillor Riccioli as well.
Point of order, the foreshadowed motion only arises when the motion is lost. The motion was carried. So 1 and 3 have been carried, and 2 has been carried but is in a state of ineffectual. It has not achieved its absolute majority. So it still exists, but in effect, it was lost because it was won on a simple majority but has not achieved an absolute majority. Then it can be classed as not having been passed. So, sir, you might want to make that clear to the people who, if they wanted to actually act upon the narrow view of the legal advice and understanding what's just happened, you could put it again.
So I think based on that, I'd probably suggest that you may want to put section number 2 again, reminding that requires an absolute majority.
Point of order. Do we have to agree that that section 2 gets separated, if that's what you're looking to do?
That's the presiding member's decision as to whether he puts it again or not. Presiding member's decision as to whether he puts that again or not. It will be up to the presiding member as to whether he puts part 2 in order to reach an outcome or whether he does not.
So, okay, I will put point 2 to vote again, but it will require absolute majority, otherwise 1 and 3 will go through. The microphone, please, just for that.
Sir, thank you for that. Will you allow me to speak as the mover of the original motion? It'll be very short.
Phil.
No, I won't, sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so therefore, I will put this in 4 years. I've never had to do this, I'll be honest. So. Therefore, we'll put forward, we'll vote on item 2.
So if you're putting forward item 2, you'll need to move in a second.
Okay.
A reminder that it needs an absolute majority.
All right, so I'll put forward item 2. It will need an absolute majority. Do I have a mover for point 2? Councillor McNeish. Seconded, Councillor Ryan. Do I have any objection? Councillor Cox. Therefore, Mr McNeish, would you like to put your motion forward?
I put the motion that according and noting Councillor Ryan's previous and still current nomination to the Audit and Risk Committee, that the Council appoint Councillor Ryan to that Audit and Risk Committee. And I do note the comments that from Councillor Riccioli that she didn't have a problem with that and has been encouraging, as have other councillors, of membership of this committee. And this is just a step in building the membership of the committee. Thank you.
I'm going to ask a question. So what will this mean to how many people will be on this committee compared with what was originally done to where we are now?
So you'll have to look at your terms of reference moving forward, but because of the narrow view already determined by council there, noting, Councillor Ryan would need to be on that committee. We'll need to address the 5, so we're going to have to need
If
2.
this is carried, there'll be 5 people on it because there's already 4.
The terms of reference?
We'll obviously need to update that, but a decision of council will trump the terms of reference and in terms of this decision. So if you carry this, there'll be 5.
And ask a question.
You may ask a question.
And that does not prevent or preclude the council from changing the number of people on this committee at any time going forward.
No, and the council can do that now also by moving more people.
Okay. Councillor Ryan, do you wish to speak?
Further.
Mr Mayor, can I foreshadow an alternative?
You may.
Can I foreshadow an alternative that, go back to councillor Riccelli's original alternative, that all members of councillors be on, 8 councillors be appointed to the Audit and Risk Committee?
Well, it's...
Point of order, sir, that's already been put and lost.
No. She's not actually stating that all councillors, she's stating a number of councillors, and as you said, that can be changed.
All councillors.
8, she was quoting a number.
All councillors is 8, so it is the same thing. So that has been put and lost. That is correct.
Point of order, Mr McNeish just identified that we can put through an amendment to have more councillors on there.
You can, but under the standing orders, if there's already been a motion that's been put and lost, you can't.
There is a difference in the wording between all to 8.
It's still effectively the same. All councillors is 8 councillors.
Okay. Do I have a speaker against? Speaker for? Okay. Therefore, on number 2, I'll put the motion forward. All those in favour? All those against? Motion's lost. Okay. Thank you. Now we move on to item 18.1. This is a confidential matter, so I'll have to ask the general gallery to please move outside. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. We have a report of confidential nature in accordance to the section 5.232C of the Local Government Act 1995. This report has been provided to councillors and the Chief Executive Officer only. In order to maintain confidentiality of these items, I'll seek a decision to close the meeting to members of the public and all staff. Do I have a motion to close the meeting? Moved, Councillor Cox. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Riccelli. Therefore, all those in favour? Motion's carried 7-0. Yeah.
Sorry, can you get rid of that? Because you need to read aloud.
Yeah.
Yep.
So just for the record, item 18.1, confidential item, that the councillors adopt the officer recommendation outlined in confidential attachment 1 was carried 7-0. Therefore, at this point, closure. The next ordinary council meeting will be Wednesday, 13th December 2023. I now declare the meeting closed at 7:41, and I thank everyone for their participation. Thank you, councillors.